Hi. So in this video, right, I will be talking about the Sec 4 Science Bio Term 1 WA, okay? So let's begin with the MCQs first. For the first question, right, which statement on blood component is not correct, okay? So for part C, right, it is wrong because of the word irreversible. Hemoglobin binds to oxygen, right? The binding is a reversible process. So therefore, C is the correct answer. Okay? Which is not correct actually. So yeah, it sounds confusing, but yes. For question 2, right, you have 4 unknowns. By looking at the circulation, actually the answer, right, for heart is actually C, okay? Um, you can see that it has to be through inference, because if you look at C, right, there is an arrow going out, and this arrow, right, will go to the top and to the bottom. This is inferred as the rest of the body and the head. But there is one more over here, and you can see that it goes to the lungs before it returns to the heart. So if you were to do if you try to figure out this diagram, right, through elimination, C is the best answer. Part C, which action is important in minimizing the transmission of pathogens, okay, the spread of diseases? Using separate cutting boards for meat and vegetable, right, is actually a very common use in everyday life. Okay, this is to minimize the transmission of pathogens from meat to vegetables. For part D, right, it is the trick here is only water, and so it is not good enough. Okay, when you wash your hands, right, you must wash your hands with water and disinfectant. So please take note. For part 4, the question asks for ways to increase the rate of oxygen absorption. Okay, so for statement 1 and 4, right, they are correct because they can increase oxygen absorption. Increasing the surface area works, and decreasing the distance for diffusion also will increase absorption. For 2 and 3, right, actually they don't increase the absorption rate. Okay, 3 has no relevance at all. And so because of this, right, the correct answer is 1 and 4. Okay. Question 5. Now, I am quite surprised that majority of the people who take this paper, right, they got this wrong. Okay, so maybe it is a careless mistake. The bronchus, right, is at S. That is the bronchus. Okay, the big one. The bronchus is always bigger than the bronchioles. The smaller offshoots, right, are known as bronchioles. So the answer is B and not A. Okay, yeah. It's actually quite straightforward, but I think if you were to revise, you should be able to nail it better. Okay, so let's move on to the structure. Okay, the first question, right, talks about the parts of the heart. Now, A is a semilunar valve that is at the pulmonary artery. Okay, for B, it is the aorta. For C, it is a pulmonary vein. Please try to identify the parts from a three-dimensional diagram of a heart. And so for part A, right, the answers for B and C are there. Okay? And since I'm talking about part D, right, let's talk about part D first. For part D, they ask you to draw a line and label with an X. So you must draw the line and label with an X. And of course, write the question number. Okay? Highest blood pressure is the left ventricle. Okay? For part B, describe one functional difference and one structural difference between B and C. If your labeling for B and C is correct, then you should know that B is an artery known as the aorta, and C is the pulmonary vein, which is a vein. Okay, so for the functional difference, right, it is basically the function of an artery and a vein. The artery transports blood away from the heart to the, in this case, the aorta, right, so to the rest of the body. For part C, it is the pulmonary vein, and pulmonary vein transports blood towards the heart, but because it is pulmonary vein, right, so maybe you can write from the start, from the lungs. Okay, this will make your answer stronger. Okay, structural difference, right? I would think that it's better to write this all three down. Thicker, more muscular, and more elastic. This to me, right, is the most important structural difference. I don't really think that we should go into valves and lumen, okay, and especially lumen, because lumen is, I don't know, I don't really know how to describe, but I think that talking about the walls is a straightforward answer. All right. So part C, describe the function of the valves. This is the semilunar valve. And I want you to talk about the closing or opening, okay? Because the closing and opening has different elaboration. If the valves close, then blood is prevented from flowing backwards, in this case, which is the right ventricle. If the valve opens, right, it allows blood to move on. So I always think that opening and by writing opening and closing, right, opening or closing is a better way to make your answer uh, better. Okay, so please do not describe a semilunar valve like semilunar valve prevents backflow of blood. I think it's better to talk about when it is closed. So please remember that. Part E. Explain what causes coronary heart disease. Now, the reason why it is called coronary heart disease is because of the coronary arteries. And please take note, it's not a normal artery. Okay, you have to focus on the coronary artery. And the coronary artery, right, the most important thing, right, is you must talk about that the arteries are being blocked. Or we use the word occlusion, which is right at the bottom. Okay, the first 3 points, right, talks about how it is formed. So I think these 3 points are good enough. You don't really have to go into the details, I feel. So you start off with a diet that is excessive of saturated fats. Okay, that means you must put it into your mouth, the diet. It has to go into the body first. This going into the body, right, will lead to fat deposition on the inner walls of coronary arteries. You must intentional, okay? You must write the word coronary intentionally. This deposition of fats will decrease the lumen size and hence increase blood pressure. And I think that's good enough. Okay, you can continue to write other stuff, but yeah, like I said, it's 3 to 5 marks. I don't think there is any more that you can elaborate. Okay, so yeah, this is my advice for explaining coronary heart disease. Question 2 is straightforward. It is on respiration. So the word equation, word, is there. I will not talk about it because it is quite straightforward. And the question asks for one similarity and one difference. Okay, there are 2 similarities that I gave you, and I give you 3 differences. So you can use all these together. If it's a free response question, right, there are actually 5 points to write. Now, part C is the one that is the most difficult, I think, or most challenging for you guys. Okay, so the question talks about the trachea over here. So take note, right, it's the trachea, not the alimentary canal. And so G are the cilia. Okay, this is a smoking question because it's talking about cigarette smoking. So a chemical found in cigarette smoke destroys the cilia. Okay, paraphrase it so that it doesn't have to feel so foreign. So people, right, who has prolonged exposure to this chemical will experience persistent coughing and breathlessness. You must learn how to paraphrase this, okay, by writing down the condition. So the question asks for name the chemical and then explain. And this is a 5-mark question, correct? So take a look at the answer. The chemical, right, is tar. All right, sorry for the annotation. So tar is the answer. And then these are the explanation for tar. Tar paralyzes cilia so that the cilia cannot function. And this is the function of the cilia. Okay? Because cilia is unable to remove mucus, the mucus will accumulate and it will decrease the lumen in the air passage. Alright, the air passage becomes narrow, which is the decrease in diameter. This decrease in diameter, right, will cause the inflammation of the cells along the air passage. So they will start to be inflamed, and the condition is known as bronchitis. So for a person with bronchitis, right, the person will continue to cough. So we call this persistent coughing. And this persistent coughing, right, will ultimately lead to emphysema, yes. Okay? It will ultimately lead to emphysema, but you must first mention the breakdown of the partition walls in the alveoli. This breakdown of partition walls in the alveoli will continue to decrease the elasticity of the alveolar walls, which will ultimately lead to emphysema. Okay, so a total of 5 marks. This is more than 5 marks. The whole idea, right, is to answer them in a proper sequence. Okay, so work on this aspect of the chapter. Okay. Question 3 is the last question. This is a question that is linked to infectious disease. So over here, right, you have 5 antibiotics, and this time it's not a virus, it's a bacteria, but it's the same lah, it's the same idea. Okay, so the antibiotics will kill the bacteria. The clear area, right, shows that there are no bacteria because the bacteria is being killed. This is obviously the best. Okay, and this one is obviously not very good. So you can see the clear area. Clear area means the bacteria are being killed. So therefore there is no bacteria growing. The first question has to link with this picture, and so the question asks for state which antibiotic will be prescribed, and then explain your answer. Okay, so 1 mark for telling me that it is D, and the second mark, right, is you have to be more intentional in your writing. You must mention that it kills the most bacteria, or it prevents the bacteria from growing, and it has to be the word most because it's the biggest. So sometimes your answer, right, is correct, but it's just that it is not strong enough. Okay. Now, how do you explain, right, or how do you elaborate on what is a control? For part B, right, this is a control answer. And when you write control, right, you should not just write control and then full stop. You have to try to elaborate on what a control means with the context of the question. So in this example, right, I've given you two suggestions. So control, yes, and is to show that the results are not due to the paper disc. Okay, or to show that the results are due to the antibiotic, and this is the one that is more common. So basically, don't just write control and full stop. Continue to explain what a control is with respect to the context of the question. Okay. Part C is on resistant. It sounds weird. So you see over here, the remaining batches, that means the one that is not dead, is used again by the same antibiotic for 9 more times. This is inferred as many times. So for antibiotic resistance to occur, right, they have to undergo a lot of treatment by the same chemical, and they will become stronger and stronger, right? Inverted commas, right? They will become more and more resistant because they will mutate. So basically, right, what will happen to the clear area? The clear area becomes smaller, 1 mark. Okay, and why? It's because of antibiotic resistance. So this is actually what I'm actually looking for. Okay. D is a very straightforward question on what is a vaccine and what does vaccine do. Okay, despite how the question is being phrased. So describe how the immune system respond to a vaccination. So it's the same idea. So number 1, right, talk about vaccine. Okay, so this is the definition of a vaccine. Vaccine contains an agent that resembles a pathogen or a bacteria or antigen. It doesn't really matter. Okay, and then you can continue to elaborate that it is made out of dead or weakened or contain parts. But this is actually the first line that you must write. So this agent, right, will stimulate the white blood cells in our body to divide to produce antibodies. So they will become more and more and more. Okay, antibodies are proteins that are specific in their action, so they are able to bind to the bacteria in this case, and then they will destroy them. So these white blood cells, right, that produces the unique antibodies will remain as memory cells. Okay, they will remain in the body as memory cells. They will continue to divide. And if the live bacteria again enters the body, again, so this is the real one. If you really get an infection, they will start to produce antibodies quickly. The response will be faster this time. And so the reaction against the bacteria will be faster, and so from a person's point of view, the person will not get infected straight away. Okay, something along that line. So this is how you should describe or explain what vaccines are and what they do. Okay, so this is my take on this paper. If you have any questions, please come and ask me, but I guess that's it. Okay, thank you, bye bye.